The grand ballroom at the Four Seasons sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the soft murmur of San Francisco's business elite celebrating my father's 60th birthday. I stood near the dessert table in a simple black dress from Nordstrom Rack, watching my family work the room like the financial powerhouses they'd always been. Dad moved between guests in his custom Armani tuxedo, accepting congratulations and firm handshakes from venture capitalists, tech executives, and investment bankers who comprised his carefully cultivated professional network. "Jessica, there you are," my cousin Stephanie approached, her Tiffany tennis bracelet catching the light as she gestured with her champagne flute. "Uncle Richard's been asking about you. Try to look more presentable when you speak with his business associates, okay?" "I'll keep that in mind," I replied quietly, smoothing down my off-the-rack dress that probably cost less than Stephanie's shoes. She glided away in her Oscar de la Renta gown, leaving me standing alone among the financial elite who had no idea they were celebrating in the presence of someone whose portfolio probably exceeded most of theirs combined. To them, I was Jessica Chin, the family disappointment who'd walked away from a promising career at Goldman Sachs to pursue what they called day trading fantasies. What they didn't know was that their failed daughter had spent the last 7 years building one of the most sophisticated private investment portfolios on the West Coast, generating returns that had made me quietly wealthy beyond their imagination. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family believed I was struggling to pay rent on a studio apartment, I'd been systematically investing in early-stage startups, cryptocurrency ventures, and emerging market opportunities that had generated over $156 million in verified assets under management with Morgan Stanley Private Wealth. "Jessica, sweetheart." My mother Linda appeared at my side, her voice carrying that tone of forced cheerfulness she reserved for potentially embarrassing family situations. "I want you to meet Mr. Patterson from Pacific Capital. He's one of your father's most important clients." Mr. Patterson extended his hand with the confident grip of someone accustomed to closing 9-figure deals. "Pleasure to meet you, Jessica. What's your line of work?" "I'm an independent investor," I said simply. "Ah, day trading," he nodded with polite dismissal. "That can be quite challenging. Very few people make sustainable income from retail investing." Before I could clarify the scope of my actual investment activities, Mom was already steering the conversation elsewhere, clearly uncomfortable with my presence among Dad's prestigious business contacts. The evening continued with more of the same pattern. Guest after guest was introduced to my older brother Michael, the successful hedge fund manager, and my sister Caroline, the accomplished mergers and acquisitions attorney. I was either ignored entirely or briefly mentioned as still exploring opportunities in financial markets. "Jessica." My father Richard approached during the cocktail reception, his disappointment evident despite the celebratory atmosphere. "Your mother and I have been discussing your situation. This independent investing experiment has gone on long enough." "It's going well, Dad." "Well." He gestured around the opulent ballroom filled with titans of industry. "Look around, sweetheart. This is what real financial success looks like. Michael just closed a $2 billion fund. Caroline's firm just completed the largest tech acquisition of the year. And you're still, what exactly are you doing?" I nodded quietly, not mentioning that my recent investment in a quantum computing startup had generated a $43 million return when the company was acquired by Google last month. The condescension was suffocating, but it wasn't new. For 7 years, my family had treated me like a financial amateur who'd thrown away a prestigious Wall Street career to play the stock market from my apartment. They had no idea that their day trading daughter had built a diversified portfolio that included early investments in companies that had become household names. "You know," Uncle Mark joined our conversation, loosening his Hermes tie as he warmed to one of his favorite topics. "My firm is always looking for junior analysts. The work isn't glamorous, but it pays well. Better than whatever returns you're getting from online trading." "Thank you for thinking of me," I replied diplomatically. "The thing about investing," my brother Michael added, having overheard from nearby while networking with a group of portfolio managers, "is that it requires substantial capital to generate meaningful returns. You can't build wealth with small retail accounts." "I understand the capital requirements," I said quietly. "Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're still living paycheck to paycheck while the rest of us have built real financial positions." The words stung, but I maintained my composure. They had no idea that my small retail account had grown from $50,000 in savings into a portfolio that rivaled the holdings of many of their wealthiest clients. As dinner was announced, I found myself seated at table 15, far from the head table where my parents held court with the evening's most distinguished guests. My tablemates were polite but clearly puzzled about why someone dressed so modestly was included in such an exclusive financial gathering. "Are you in Michael's hedge fund?" asked Mrs. Wellington, a prominent wealth management advisor. "No, I manage my own investments independently." "How interesting. Personal portfolio management can be quite educational. Do you work with any of the major firms?" I smiled diplomatically. "I have relationships with several institutions." What I didn't mention was that Morgan Stanley Private Wealth had assigned me a dedicated portfolio manager and invited me to join their ultra-high net worth client advisory board, a privilege reserved for individuals with liquid assets exceeding $100 million. During the main course, Dad stood to address the room filled with San Francisco's financial elite. His speech was gracious and confident, thanking colleagues and friends for celebrating with him. He spoke glowingly about Michael's hedge fund success and Caroline's corporate law achievements, his pride evident in every word. "My children have always made me proud," he concluded, his eyes deliberately avoiding my table. "They've built meaningful careers in finance and contributed to our industry in significant ways." The omission was subtle but unmistakable. In a room of 300 financial professionals, my own father had managed to praise his children while pretending I didn't exist. After dinner, as guests mingled during the networking reception, I overheard conversations that reinforced my family's perception of my financial situation. "Poor Richard," I heard Aunt Margaret whisper to another woman near the bar. 2 out of 3 isn't bad, I suppose. At least Michael and Caroline understand real finance." "What about the youngest?" her companion asked. "Still playing around with day trading. Very sad, really. Such a bright girl from Goldman Sachs, but she's wasted all that Wall Street training." I excused myself and stepped onto the hotel's terrace, needing fresh air and a moment away from the constant financial condescension. The San Francisco skyline stretched before me, and I could see the building where I maintained a private office for managing my investment research and due diligence activities. Tomorrow I had a meeting with Sequoia Capital about co-investing in their next unicorn startup. Next week I was flying to Singapore to explore emerging market opportunities that could potentially generate another $50 million in returns over the next 2 years. But tonight I was just Jessica, the family financial failure who'd chosen amateur investing over professional success. "There you are," Uncle Mark's voice interrupted my thoughts. He stepped onto the terrace, followed by Mom, Michael, and several other family members who looked like they were preparing for another intervention. "Jessica, we need to have a serious conversation," Mom began, her voice taking on the concerned tone I'd heard too many times before. "About what?" "About your financial future. About this investing hobby that's preventing you from building real wealth." Michael crossed his arms, his expression serious. "Jess, we're worried about you. You're 34 years old with no steady income, no corporate benefits, no retirement planning through established institutions." "I have retirement planning." "Do you?" Uncle Mark challenged, his voice taking on the aggressive tone he used in hostile negotiations. "You can't even pay your own rent without borrowing money." "I don't borrow money for rent." "Then how do you afford that studio apartment?" Caroline asked, having joined the group. "We know what independent traders make. It's not enough to live in San Francisco. I manage my expenses carefully." "Managing expenses isn't the same as generating real income," Dad said, stepping onto the terrace. "Jessica, you need to face reality. This day trading experiment has failed." "It hasn't failed." "Then prove it," Uncle Mark said bluntly, his voice rising with frustration. "Show us your account statements. Show us your tax returns. Show us anything that proves you're not just barely scraping by." "I don't need to prove my financial situation to you." "Actually, you do," Mom said, her voice taking on the sharp edge she reserved for serious family discussions. "Because your choices reflect on this entire family's reputation in the financial community." "How do my investment choices reflect on you?" When people ask about Richard's children, he can proudly discuss Michael's hedge fund and Caroline's M&A practice. "But you? What is he supposed to say about you?" The words hit like a physical blow. "I don't know, Mom. What would you like him to say?" I'd like him to say that all his children are financially successful. But he can't say that when one of them can't even pay her own rent. You can't even pay your own rent, Uncle Mark laughed, his champagne-fueled confidence making him more aggressive than usual. That's the reality, Jessica. You're a financial failure living off family charity. I was about to respond when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management, and my heart rate immediately spiked. My portfolio manager only called during family events if something absolutely critical was happening. Excuse me, I said, reaching for my phone. Oh, let it go to voicemail, Uncle Mark said dismissively. We're having a family discussion about your financial problems. The phone kept ringing. This was likely the call I'd been expecting about the final settlement from my latest exit, a blockchain technology company that had just been acquired by JP Morgan Chase for a valuation that would net me approximately $47 million. I should take this. It might be important. More important than your family? Dad asked, his voice stern. The phone rang again. My portfolio manager never called twice unless it was urgent regarding major transactions. I'm sorry, but I really need to answer this. I swiped to accept the call, but as I brought the phone to my ear, Uncle Mark's voice cut through the evening air. Jessica Chin, you put that phone down right now. This is exactly what we're talking about. No priorities, no understanding of what's important. The frustration of 7 years of financial dismissal and condescension suddenly boiled over. Instead of stepping away to take the call privately, I pressed the speaker button and set the phone on the terrace table where everyone could hear. Ms. Chen, came the professional voice of David Morrison, my senior portfolio manager at Morgan Stanley. Yes, David. I'm calling with the final confirmation on your latest transaction settlement. Your $156 million portfolio transfer has just cleared and been verified by our compliance department. The terrace went silent except for the distant sound of traffic below. Uncle Mark's champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. The blockchain technology exit generated $47.3 million in realized gains, David continued, bringing your total liquid assets under management to $156.2 million as of market close today. Michael's face had gone completely pale. And the cryptocurrency positions we discussed? I asked, maintaining my composure despite the shocked faces around me. Extraordinary performance. Your early Bitcoin positions from 2016 are now worth $23.7 million, and the Ethereum holdings have reached $31.2 million. The diversified crypto portfolio you assembled is generating returns that exceed most institutional funds. Caroline grabbed the back of a chair for support. That can't be right. Additionally, David continued, Goldman Sachs has confirmed their interest in your venture capital co-investment opportunities. They're offering you a slot in their private wealth ultra-high net worth fund, with a minimum commitment of $50 million. Dad's hands were visibly shaking. What about the real estate portfolio? I asked. The commercial properties in Austin and Seattle continue to appreciate. Current valuation is $34.6 million, generating $2.3 million annually in rental income. Your residential holdings in Palo Alto and Manhattan are worth approximately $28.9 million. Uncle Mark was staring at my phone in disbelief, his earlier laughter completely forgotten. Thank you, David. Please schedule a meeting for Monday to discuss the Singapore opportunities. Of course, Ms. Chen. Should I also arrange the private jet for your trip to meet with the Temasek Holdings executives? Yes. Please coordinate with my assistant for the Asia-Pacific investment tour. Wonderful. Congratulations again on reaching the $156 million milestone. You've built an extraordinary portfolio. I ended the call and looked around the terrace at my family's stunned faces. Jessica, Mom whispered, did he just say $156 million? That's the current portfolio valuation, yes. Your portfolio? Dad asked, his voice barely audible. My investment portfolio. Built over 7 years of what you called day trading fantasies. Michael found his voice first. You're worth over $150 million? According to Morgan Stanley's latest valuation, yes. But how? Caroline asked. How is that possible? Hard work, Caroline. 7 years of 18-hour days researching emerging technologies, analyzing market trends, and identifying opportunities that traditional institutions missed. The cryptocurrency investments alone. Michael was staring at my phone where the call details were still visible. I bought Bitcoin at $400 per coin and Ethereum at $12. Most financial professionals told me it was a foolish gamble. Uncle Mark was still holding his champagne glass, his face cycling through shock, embarrassment, and disbelief. You really have $156 million. According to 3 independent valuations and Morgan Stanley's compliance verification, yes. But you said you were struggling to pay rent, Caroline protested. I never said I was struggling. You assumed I was struggling because I live modestly and don't spend money on status symbols. The studio apartment, Mom began, is actually a penthouse I own outright in Soma. I bought the entire building as an investment property. Dad sat down heavily in a nearby chair. Jessica, why didn't you tell us about your success? Because every conversation became a lecture about my poor financial choices. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted while I focused on building wealth. But we thought you were failing, Michael said. You thought I was failing because I wasn't following traditional Wall Street career paths. But sometimes the biggest opportunities exist outside conventional institutions. Uncle Mark finally set down his champagne glass. So when we said you couldn't pay your rent, you were telling someone with a $156 million portfolio that she was financially incompetent. This is incredible, Caroline muttered. What's incredible is that none of you ever asked about the actual details of my investments. You saw independent trading and immediately assumed failure. Dad looked around at the gathering of family members, all of whom were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment to awe. Jessica, he said slowly, I owe you an enormous apology. We all do, Mom said, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. Oh my God, sweetheart, what have we done? You've been honest about your perceptions, I replied calmly. You saw someone who appeared unsuccessful by traditional metrics and treated them accordingly. But why didn't you correct us? Why didn't you show us the portfolio, the success? Because every conversation became a lecture about my poor choices. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted while I focused on the work. Judge Morrison, one of Dad's longtime friends who had somehow joined the crowd on the terrace, stepped forward. Miss Chin, I owe you an apology as well. I completely misjudged your financial acumen. Thank you, Judge. Mom stood up, her makeup streaked with tears. Can you ever forgive us? There's nothing to forgive, Mom. You couldn't see my vision because I was building it quietly. But now that it exists, I hope you'll support it. How can we support you? By understanding that wealth building comes in many forms. By recognizing that innovation requires taking calculated risks that don't always look like traditional career paths. Michael put his arm around me. Jess, I'm so proud of what you've built. And so sorry we didn't see your strategy. Thank you, Michael. Dad finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Sweetheart, can you forgive a foolish old man who completely underestimated his daughter's financial intelligence? Of course, Dad. As we returned to the birthday celebration, the atmosphere had completely changed. Guests who had barely acknowledged me earlier now approached with genuine interest and respect. Word had spread quickly through the financial community about the revelation, and conversation shifted from polite dismissal to eager questions about investment strategies and market opportunities. But the moment that mattered most came at midnight when Dad took the microphone for a final toast. I want to correct something about my earlier remarks, he announced to the room filled with San Francisco's financial elite. I said that my children have always made me proud. That was incomplete. Tonight, I learned that all 3 of my children have achieved remarkable financial success, even when I was too blind to see it. He looked directly at me. To Jessica, who built extraordinary wealth while we weren't paying attention. We're sorry we missed the journey, but we're grateful to be part of celebrating the destination. The applause was thunderous. As I stood there surrounded by family and financial professionals who finally understood what I'd accomplished, I realized something important. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving your family wrong about your failure. Sometimes it's proving them wrong about what financial success looks like. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they'll love you enough to admit they were wrong and celebrate your wealth rather than questioning how you earned it.